Alright chaps, what's going on? So today I'm going to be doing a how to play Billy tutorial. I know this is different from my typical videos, but I am a P100 Billy main and I've been playing nothing but Billy since like his buff almost like a year ago. I think it was like late January I think when his buff happened. So yeah, it's been a while. But I've also played him before his buff when he wasn't as strong. So I have seen Billy at his worst and at his peak. Anyways, why don't we just get started? So let's get started on the basics of his chainsaw. His chainsaw has a charge time of 2.5 seconds. That basically means that it takes 2.5 seconds to get the blue bar from one end to the other if you just hold down M2, L2, or LT. Once this bar gets to the end, Billy will start a chainsaw sprint at 10.12 meters per second. And for 1 second after Billy has started the action, you will have full mobility of the chainsaw. So eventually you will either bump into something or stop the chainsaw yourself via letting go of M2. And I'm going to tell you right here, right now, it's much better for you to stop the chainsaw yourself, because if you bump into something, you will get stuck in an animation and you won't be able to move. You'll be stuck in that animation. To be exact, you'll be stuck in it for 2.5 seconds, which is a lot. However, if you let go of the chainsaw, you will move really slow, to be exact 1.89 meters per second, but it's still better than not moving at all. So it is much better for you to just let go. Alright, let's talk about the fun in Billy's chainsaw. That would be the overdrive state. While playing him, you may notice that his chainsaw will become increasingly blue until it becomes a fiery blue. This means that his chainsaw is in the overdrive state. While in this overdrive state, which lasts 20 seconds, Billy's chainsaw will have many buffs, like his chainsaw sprint will be at 12 meters per second instead of 10.12 meters per second. Not only that, his charge time is reduced by 5% and his overall cooldown is reduced by 10%. So yeah, while in this state, Billy's chainsaw is extremely dangerous, and you may be wondering, how do I get this overdrive state? Well, the only way to get the overdrive state is by constantly using your chainsaw. If you don't use your chainsaw often, you won't be able to reach overdrive. And to give rough estimates, it would take around 20 seconds of consistently using your chainsaw in order to get overdrive. So let me go ahead and just give like a quick example. Basically, you would have to use your chainsaw for 20 seconds normally, no overdrive, in order to get 20 seconds of chainsaw overdrive. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a balance, you know? Okay, another thing I would like to mention here is that Billy's chainsaw has the ability to break walls and pallets when you decide to bump into them. He will break the pellet in 1 second, which is pretty fast, but he will be stuck in an animation and he has to go on cooldown after that, so there's like a whole thing to it. But I still will say, if your chainsaw is up though, it is much better to break the pellet with your chainsaw if it is up. However, if you need to pull up your chainsaw, it is much better for you just to break the pellet normally. Okay, let's move on to the next thing you must learn with Billy, and that would be feathering slash edging. The original term is called feathering, but I decided to call it edging because why not? It's very similar, I will tell you that. Anyways, you may have noticed that when playing other characters like Wesker or Artist, the blue bar needs to reach the end in order for you to actually use your power. I know, right? But one way they differ from Billy is that they need to hold down M2 all the way through the action. If they let go of M2 at the 90%, the blue bar will restart and they will have to hold down M2 again from the very beginning. With Billy, however, if your bar were at 90% and you let go of M2, instead of restarting completely, it will slowly start to regress until it reaches 0, right? This basically means that you can keep your chainsaw at 90% if you can feather it. I will say that in order to get good use out of feathering, you must keep the bar at 90 to 95%. Mind you, this is quite hard to get used to because most of the time you will either be pressing M2 too much and you will start to sprint at a time you didn't want to, or you won't be pressing M2 enough and it will regress too much and you won't be able to use your chainsaw at the time you want it. I will say that feathering is one of those techniques that comes with time. The more you play Billy, the more and more you will get used to feathering until it basically becomes muscle memory and you won't even have to look at the bar anymore, like straight up. Like for me, for example, I rarely have to look at the bar. I would say the only times I have to look at the bar is when I use the eerie engravings add-on because I'm not used to that. However, base kit feathering, I've almost gotten used to it and I could basically just like go off of muscle memory. I don't need to look at the bar anymore. One way you can practice One way you can practice is by going into a custom match and obviously loading up Billy and just practice feathering. Once you feel comfortable feathering in place, you must incorporate moving because you will be feathering while moving 90% of the time. Like I would say maybe 99% of the time. You will be moving, so you need to factor in moving while feathering. One thing I must mention before moving on is that the overdrive state does affect feathering, since when you're in the overdrive, you do get a 5% increased charge speed. Therefore, you must learn how to feather while in overdrive as well, because 5% does change a lot. For example, while in overdrive, you may not have to press M2 as many times to keep it at that 90 to 95%, but not too much, just enough to factor in that 5%. So yes, feathering is a very complicated and very time consuming thing to learn, but once you learn it, oh, you'll be godly. I can show you a couple of examples where having optimal feathering is like top tier. Like when you have that optimal feathering, it is just mwah, peak chef's kiss, honestly, to be honest. The center gens helps a lot because it forces them to basically play outside. If you start, hold up, I need to lock in. It's probably better actually. Hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it. Gotcha. Okay, so the next topic is going to be collision. Collision is another thing one must learn in order to play Billy. This isn't necessarily a technique, it's more something that you must learn to factor in while playing Billy. So while playing Billy, his chainsaw sprint has a collision zone, where if another hitbox touches this collision zone, it will either cause Billy to go into the bumped animation, or it's going to connect with a survivor, giving you the down. The thing is that this collision zone is never shown to you, but it's roughly on Billy's upper torso and his head, and it stretches out just a little bit over the chainsaw, and it's just a little bit wider than his body. It's around roughly around that. Let's talk about the map collision because that's where things get really wacky. So if you have played any other mobility or range character like Wesker, Blight, or Huntress, or Slinger, you may have noticed how wacky the collision hitboxes of the objects in the map are. Some maps have some really restrictive hitboxes where their model doesn't match up with their hitbox, so it confuses the player because we can't see the hitbox, we only see the model. So that makes us think, oh, the hitboxes must line up with the model, but they don't, not in this game. However, there are also maps where the collision is actually more forgiving, where the models are actually the ones tricking you instead of the hitboxes. So what happens when Billy interacts with these collision or these hitboxes? Instead of going into the bumped animation, he will instead slide off the object and it will allow you to continue his chainsaw sprint. One really good example I can give is the Garden of Joy shack. For some reason, the corners of the shack have lowered collision that basically lets you turn the corner faster than normal because you don't have to factor in the collision of the shack anymore. But at the end of the day, this is just something that you learn with Billy as you go. Shit, I'm even still learning low collision spots that I didn't even know existed, and I have roughly around a couple hours on Billy, like about a couple hundred hours on him, and I'm still learning because either new maps come out or maybe like a little bug caused one little model to become to have lower collision or something like that, and just boom, all of a sudden you used to not be able to slide off of that thing and all of a sudden you can now. It's really weird. It's just something that you learn, but I just decided to give you the bare minimum of collision so you guys have a general understanding of what it is, so you don't go in there blind. Alrighty, so curving. Probably the most important thing about Billy, but I felt like if y'all knew about other things before, curving would be a bit easier to digest. So remember how I mentioned how Billy, once he starts his chainsaw sprint, he has 1 second of full mobility of his chainsaw, basically meaning that he can move however he pleases for that 1 second. Well, during this 1 second is where you're going to be curving because it's basically impossible to do any curving after that 1 second. The act of curving is actually quite simple. For example, if you want to curve as soon as that blue bar reaches 100%, you turn your mouse or your joystick into the direction you please. Simple, right? But the hard part is actually not bumping into something while doing this curve or actually getting the survivor. Another thing one must know is that you can't curve every loop. Some loops would just be way too hard and you're better off when winning unless you want the survivor to have a 5-gen chase. Alrighty, so the tile I'm going to showcase for this tutorial is going to be the TNL Wall, just because how notoriously difficult it is. in order to use your chainsaw. You're better off M1ing, I will say that. However, let's go ahead and just get started on it. Let's just say that a survivor was starting off at the shack, and they managed to somehow run all the way over here. They get you, and then they run back over here to the TNL wall. You still haven't been able to get them. Let's say they drop the pellet on you, so then you have to break it, and then by the time you go up, you're barely having your chainsaw up. And to be honest, right here, there's so many things that the survivor could do. There's like literally like at least like maybe 4 or 5 things that they could do. So for example, right here, right, just when I'm in this state, feathering. For example, the survivor could go ahead and just vault the window and expect you to just go ahead and play it out like this, and you won't reach it because most of the time the survivors have enough distance in order to vault the pallet. Or they could just crouch right here, and then when you try to go for it, you might either hit too much. You might hit too much over here or over here, and you won't be able to get them. That's going to give them time to go to the other window. Or they go wide, and you end up hitting over here on the window, and they come over here, all the way over here. Or you, as a person, as the Billy, decides to go the other way, predicting that they're going to vault the window. But guess what? Maybe they don't vault the window, and then they just stay here, right here. And then that gives them an opportunity to run back over here and vault over here, or maybe be over here for a check spot. There's just so many possibilities that they could do. And another thing that more experienced Billy players might say, well, then why don't you just feather until you round the corner, right? So basically like this. I stay like this. But if you think about it, if you stay like this, there'll never be a perfect opportunity for you to do it, because obviously if the survivor sees you like this, literally feather up with your chainsaw, they're just gonna vault the window, and then by the time you walk over here and try to get them, they'll already be on the other side of the L wall, like over here. So you'll never be able to catch up, unfortunately. Your best bet would just be to predict, to be honest with you. And I think I did mention this but your best bet is to just predict. That's the only way I've gotten people in TNL walls for the most part, unless I'm like unbearably close to them. So like, let's say the survivor's like right here, and I'm like right here, then yeah, I can make it. Obviously, I'll be able to make it in time before they do anything. But most of the time, they're not that close to me. They're close enough where they can have that leverage over me. I don't have time to just be feathering around like this, because by the time look, I'm really slow while in this feathering state. Like I think you walk like slightly slower than the survivors. Like I think 3.89 to be, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, you walk pretty slow while holding up your chainsaw, which makes sense, right? But yeah, you're never gonna catch them up while walking with your chainsaw up. I will go ahead and show some examples of me predicting and me actually being right, but there's also plenty of times, honestly, I'm going to say right now, there's more times I'm wrong than I am right. But yeah, there's been times where I remember, like, I see a survivor right here, and I decide to just, go for it, and guess what? They were vaulting, and I got the down. And there's been times where, you know what, I feel like maybe they're gonna hide on their, oh well, I didn't curve right there correctly, but sometimes I feel like they might just be on the little corner right here. Boom, I get them. And sometimes I feel like they vault the window, and I actually be over here expecting them already, like, for the check spot. Getaway survivor. So there's just so many and oh, not only that, when there's a gen here, it makes everything so much more annoying, because they could basically use this little area to like just hide, and you can't do anything. By all logical reasoning, I should not be chasing her here. This is especially with the chainsaw. Ooh, but it feels so satisfying when you do get somebody in a TNL. If that raid was perfect. Oh, I'm chasing Hawk to a 5000. And alrighty, so this is the topic that I wanted to go over in like actual gameplay, rather than just me explaining it, because theory could only take you so far, right? Anyways, basically, what I was saying is that curving normally would be kind of like this, like right here, or like around right here. Remind you that there's a red stain on you that you obviously can't see, but the survivors can. So if you try to curve like this, they'll be able to tell for sure. And let's just say, for example, the survivor is like right here, because they will most likely be here waiting to see what you're gonna do. If they see that red stain, they're gonna know you're gonna go for the curve, and it's gonna be super easy. You're gonna go into cooldown, and they're gonna run again to the pallet, and then it's gonna be an endless loop. However, if you're like this, if you just change your angle just a little bit, like this, you move a little back, you can go like this. Look at that. And because way tighter than it would have been like this, because you have to factor in for this corner right here. Mind you, like this. Look at that. Oh, well, I didn't do it right, but it's a little bit hard. Curving is hard, a little bit. It's a little bit hard. And you also have to get the angles right. I don't always get them correctly, so I'm gonna go ahead and show that because I don't always get them correctly. I like it, that first time I did it was pretty good actually. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do it again. There you go. See, that angle was a little bit less further back and more like right here. So it all really depends, and they won't see your scratch. They won't. I mean, they won't see your red stain because you're just super far away. And they might think like, what is he go? They might even think that you're straight up just leaving the chase like from this angle, because let's say roughly speaking, like I said, they're right here. They might peek over here and see that you're going. They might think like, oh, he's probably just gonna go over there. Let me come back over here. So yeah, see, oh, sometimes you have to factor in that corner. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, freaking tight. That was a tight ass curve. But yeah, basically, and like I said, I could explain it for every tile, but that would take me forever to be honest. So like I said, if y'all want a video like that, you guys are gonna be having me work overtime, but I'll do it. All right, if y'all really want that. So yeah, I did show this example, like a custom game example, and I will show an actual game example of a game where it actually happened, where me changing the angle of where I curve at actually influences a lot of how tight and how you could potentially get the down. Holy. Okay, there are many playstyles one can incorporate while playing Billy, but good news, you don't have to stick to one. You can combine them all to become a goated Billy. Let's talk about the most boring but the most effective playstyle. That would be back revving. Basically, with back revving, you want to try to get as close as possible to the survivor, and when you do, you literally start to rev the chainsaw on their back, literally. You usually do this when the survivor isn't going to reach a pallet or window in time, or if they're in a dead zone. This playstyle is quite boring because most survivors panic when they have a chainsaw that close to them and they just cave in. But the couple times where a survivor jukes you out of a back riv, you might want to feather slash edge just for a little bit, just to instill a little bit of panic, and they will probably do what they wanted to do, like their juke, and that gives you time to like, oh, I can redirect now because I'm still feathering, and then wapoom. That's how you counter the people who juke you while you're trying to back riv. You just continue feathering until you feel more confident that you're gonna hit it. Alright, the next playstyle would be the Curve Billy playstyle. This basically means you just focus on curves and tiles and basically anywhere you can. This is the most common playstyle among experienced Billy players because it's fun, but it's also quite rewarding. It's just going to take a while to get used to. Since I already talked about curving in the previous topic, I'm going to go ahead and just move on to the next playstyle because you guys already have a rough idea of what Curve Billy basically is. The next playstyle would be Snipe Billy or Drift King, whatever you call it. This playstyle isn't really suitable to be doing all game, but it could be done if you try hard enough. I wouldn't recommend it though. Anyways, what it consists of is just running around the map with your chainsaw and trying your best not to bump into anything, which depending on the map is going to be incredibly hard or incredibly easy. If you want to do this playstyle, you will need at least one turn rate add-on because base kit is going to be rough. You can do it, but it's going to be pretty freaking rough, I'm not going to lie. You will also need to learn collision pretty well because you will be sliding off a lot of things, and you're gonna need to slide off a lot of things because that's, in a lot of maps, that's the only way it's gonna be possible. Anyways, I would consider these to be the main three playstyles as a Billy main, and you should try your best to incorporate all these playstyles. Something I do is if I'm looping a survivor and I can't down them, then what I do is just leave chase and I start the snipe Billy playstyle until I find another survivor or actually down another survivor with my sniping. So yeah, like how I mentioned earlier, do not try to stick to one playstyle. Try to incorporate these main three playstyles. There's probably more playstyles, but I will say that if you know these three, you'll be a good enough Billy main and possibly even better than me or anybody, depending on how much hours you devote into this. But these are like the top three, I would say. Okay, so this topic is going to be quite short just because there isn't that many texts left with Billy. I remember when there used to be a bunch like Space Billy, Low Pro Flicking, and Parkour Billy. And I know some of you might be saying Low Pro is still a thing. It didn't get removed, but yeah, but the fact that the survivor goes into deep wound instead and doesn't go down, it just doesn't feel as rewarding anymore. So it's basically dead for the most part, I would say. Another thing that they removed from low pro is the fact that it doesn't go back to insta downing after the 5 seconds. Yeah, no, straight up they removed the fact that it goes back to insta downing. It just straight up, once you do the low pro flicking, it just straight up stays in deep wound for the rest. You could literally do a snipe of a low pro flicking and you will get a deep wound. Anyways, I shouldn't be talking about those texts because they're basically irrelevant because they either got removed or don't work the same way that they do. But one tech you must keep in mind isn't actually one that you can do. It's one that survivors can do, and it's called the crouch tech. I'm sorry I'm gonna have to explain this on MS Paint, but I just don't have anybody. Anyways, as you can see, the red is like the collision or the hitboxes of the hillbilly and the survivor. And remember how I mentioned the collision zone is you roughly like around his head to his upper torso, around that area. Mind you, look at this. The collision zone does not cover all of this. It does not cover his legs. So when the Billy is in a higher area and the survivor is in a lower area, their hitboxes tend to go lower. And what ends up happening is that if this Billy goes any further, the survivor is gonna get stuck on where the arrow is. Well, no, not the survivor. The Billy is gonna get stuck in that arrow, and you won't be able to move. What's gonna happen is that eventually the chainsaw will just stop. This will give the survivor enough time to run away because you will go into cooldown, and you have to go ahead and chase him again. But yeah, but something about when you are when the Billy is in a higher elevation area and the survivor is in a lower elevation area, that just causes the survivor, like, it causes the game to essentially break and they just cannot connect. And since you've been holding a chainsaw in place, the game just stops the chainsaw for you. This is something that very experienced survivors do, and believe me, when they do it to you and you're like, man, I'm about to get a curve, and then they do it to you, oh, it's gonna be so devastating, because it will happen, like, no matter what. There is survivors that will do this to you no matter what. The only way you can counter the crouch stick is if your chainsaw is directly, and I mean directly, on the survivor. That is the only way, and sometimes that doesn't even help all the time. For example, an example like the one that I showed on MS Paint, that's not gonna happen. You're never gonna hit the survivor. This is too much of a drastic change of elevation. But there is areas where the elevation is just slightly lower, and that could potentially cause you to connect with the survivor's hitboxes, but don't bet on it. Alrighty, so it seems like we have reached the end of the tutorial. I hope this helps any upcoming Billy mains out there. My one piece of advice for learning Billy and mastering Billy would just be to be consistent with playing Billy. I'm sorry, I know that might be like kind of common, but that's just something that you need to do. And I think that basically applies to anything in life or in this game. You need to put hours into something in order to be good at it, and it's going to take a lot of failure. It's going to take a lot of games where you're not going to win, and the survivors are going to teabag you at the exit gates and everything, but you can use that as fuel. I don't care if you literally just play him like the most boring way back revving. Eventually something will happen in a match that's gonna make you like, whoa, I can do this. Oh wow, I'm gonna start doing this. I know I will. You just need to put hours into him, and believe me, you will become a pretty good at Billy. Who knows? You might even become a better Billy than I could ever, or the top Billy players out there. However, I do think that to most people, Billy is quite fun to play, so consistently playing him won't be a problem. So that means that, maybe whoever's watching this video is already on the right track to becoming a GOATED Billy main. But yeah, that's enough yapping from me. I hope you guys have a great and wonderful rest of your day and week, and I will see you in the next one, chaps.